Well, hello there. If you're like me when you play HOI4, a lot of times you rush your military high command because you're wanting to get as much ticking daily XP as possible because you want to max out your army, naval, and air XP as quick as possible. So you rush that and you go and pick out your advisors and they'll give you a running daily XP. Once you've accumulated so much XP, a lot of times you'll go to your Army High Command and go pick a corresponding spirit. If you are Democracy, it's almost always Relief of Command. Naval, you'll go Naval Reform. And then on Air Force, you'll go to Branch Independent Spirit. As you can see, the Branch Independent Spirit is going to give me an additional 0.1 XP daily on top of the 0.3 my Air Command Specialist was already giving me. But the other day, my friend came over, and yes, I do have IRL friends, and he wanted to play a Soviet Union game on my computer. When he went to pick his Air Force command, he didn't choose Branch Independent Spirit. He chose Air Crew Surveys. And when I asked him why he didn't go Branch Independent Spirit, he said, well, with Air Crew Surveys, it's not just about avoiding accidents. It gives you a pretty steep discount on your air doctrine. So that got me thinking. What actually is the more cost-effective way to max out your air doctrine? Is it getting that daily additional XP so you can purchase those doctrines? Or do you take the standard and then go with the discount that comes from Aircrew Surveys? As usual, I made an Excel sheet. In HOI4, there's 3 different tiers of your chief of your military. They go from Specialist, which provides 0.2 XP, Expert, which provides 0.3, and in rare occasions, you might have a Genius, which gives you 0.4 XP. And if you want that expertise, you got to pay for it. So you see, the weaker ones cost less, and if you wanted a Genius one, it would actually be 200 political power. Now, when it comes to air doctrine, each branch has 12 total that you can purchase. So that's going to be a total of 1,200 air XP you'll need to max out your tree. However, if you have Aircrew Surveys, that cost is going to drop quite a bit, by 15% in fact. So if you have Aircrew Surveys, you only need 1,020 XP to max out your air doctrine. So at a base, that's a difference of 180 XP. So in terms of maxing out your air doctrine, which one gets you there faster? Is it the Branch Independent Spirit with that 0.1 ticking XP? Or is it the Aircrew Surveys that give you that flat 15% off everything you spend? In this table I have here, I break it down by how much XP you would have accumulated by a given day, and the corresponding XP that's given through the Chief of Air Force you have. So the Specialist gives you 0.2, Expert 0.3, and the Genius 0.4. But there's one other factor that can go into this, and that is the type of Chief of Air Force you have. Each Chief of Air Force gives you some kind of modifier in battle, but there is one that just gives you an overall churning XP gain. This trait is called the Air Reformer. For Specialist, he gives you 5% boost, Expert 10%, and at Genius, he gives you a full 15% buff. So in that case, I need to go ahead and multiply whatever our daily XP is by the percentage that the Reformer gives us. Now, I've checked every nation. A Air Reform Specialist does not exist. All the ones available in game are either Experts or Geniuses, so you can ignore this column. But if you had an Air Reform Expert, he's not just giving you 0.3 XP, but 0.3 times 1.1 XP, or 0.33 XP daily. And if you have an Air Reform Genius, that 0.4 becomes 0.46. So even here, just scrolling down, you can see the massive difference whichever one you chose impacts how much XP you've gained. So for example, looking at the difference between just a normal Air Specialist versus a Genius Reformer, you've over doubled the amount of XP you accrue. But with Branch Independent Spirit, we have to add an additional 0.1 XP onto that. So our Specialist wouldn't be giving us just 0.2, it actually goes up to 0.3. That's a pretty significant increase. And if that Chief of the Air Force is a Reformer, that percentage bump he's giving you not only goes to the base, but also to the additional XP gained from the Branch Independent Spirit. So if you had Branch Independent Spirit with a Reform Genius, we're talking about 0.5 times 1.15. That's a daily increase of 0.575 air XP a day. That's wild. So now that we have the math sorted out, which one of these is better to max out air doctrine? And does it matter? Does it vary if I have an Expert versus a Genius, or if I'm using a Reformer versus, say, a close air support guy? Well, I ran the numbers, and it is always better to go with the branch independent Spirit, even with that 15% discount you get from doing the aircrew surveys. And that does not matter whatever level your air chief is and if he's a reformer or not. Branch independent Spirit always gets you there faster. Here's a breakdown of both spirits with each type of Chief of Air Force you can have. And you can see in every situation, it's always faster. But you can see the more XP you're accruing daily, the smaller the gap actually is. So branch independent Spirit is significantly better if you don't have much XP at all accruing daily, and it's a little bit better if you have a lot. Okay, so the more XP you have, the closer the gap gets to where aircrew surveys might actually be the more cost-effective route. Okay, so let's look at a nation that gets a lot of ticking air XP and see how that works. So for example, let's take a look at Iran. They actually have two focuses that gives them a permanent ticking air XP. The first is Pilot Training Program, which gives you 0.2 air XP. Again, that's insane for a 35-day focus. The second is in the Rework Sa'adabad Pact, if that's how you pronounce it. I have no clue. You go military cooperation and then down to joint military exercises. Again, that's another 0.1 XP. Then you hire their Chief of Air Force, and then you can throw on branch independent Spirit. And then all those combined, you can see that's an obscene 0.7 air XP daily. And not only that, with Iran, they also have a bunch of focuses that gives them just straight air XP dump, or it reduces the cost of air doctrine as a whole. So when we look at a nation that's super complex like Iran, where it has all those daily ticking buffs, but also all those discounts, you can see even despite that, it's still cheaper in the long run to go with branch independent Spirit. So that's an example where you have a lot of experience, but you also don't have that far to go. What about a country that has a super far way to go to max out their air doctrine? With the Soviet Union, they have this politicized military Spirit, which actually increases all doctrine costs by 20%. If that's the case, then aircrew surveys is actually going to take a much larger bite out of the XP needed. So with the Soviet Union, would it still then be better to go with branch independent Spirit? The answer is actually yeah. Despite doctrine being so much more expensive, the amount of days needed to hit your doctrine is still substantially less with branch independent Spirit versus aircrew surveys. With that being said, I still choose aircrew surveys with the Soviet Union for the other benefit it gives you. Air accident chance, minus 25%. As you can see with their Soviet Air Force National Spirit, they are quite common to have those accidents. Okay, so is there any instance where the aircrew surveys will actually outweigh the benefits of that ticking XP for branch independent Spirit? Well, let's solve this with an SAT sounding math question. I'm actually not good at math, so I'm going to have ChatGPT answer this question for me. Two men are running a race. The first man, branch independent Spirit, always runs 0.1 kilometer per hour faster than the second man, aircrew surveys. But the second man only has to go 85% of the distance of the first man. At what speed will they finish the race at the same time? So here's our answer. If you are accruing roughly 0.57 daily air XP before your Spirit of the Air Force, that is the only time aircrew surveys will be more beneficial. So theoretically with Iran, it could have been more beneficial to go aircrew surveys. However, because of all the other modifiers they get from their focus tree, branch independent Spirit was still the one. So in sum, I can think of only very rare occasions where you would use aircrew surveys. Maybe you just have a massive Air Force and you're exercising them constantly and that gets you to that point. Or maybe you're playing as the Soviet Union and you don't want to keep losing air wings from just training them. But overall, branch independent Spirit is almost always the right one to go with.